Hello and welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. I'm your host, Tigers beat writer Evan Petzold. This week, the Tigers had a 1-2 record coming out of the All-Star break with all three games against the Texas Rangers at Globe Life Field. We have two outstanding guests this week, former MLB general manager Jim Dukette and MLB Draft expert Tyler Jennings. But before we get to them, let's get into Week in Review and the Big Two. The positive news of the week, the Tigers snapped their season-long 6-game losing streak with Sunday's 2-1 win over the Rangers. Tarik Skubal pitched into the 7th inning and dominated with 11 strikeouts. His ERA is now 2.19 in 20 starts. The bullpen almost blew it, but Matt Vierling saved the day with the game-winning RBI single in the 8th inning. He had some of his best swings of the season in this game, and it looks like better times are ahead for him after a slow start in return from a shoulder injury. And then Will Vest was just incredible with the 4-out save. He needed just 9 pitches to retire Wyatt Langford, Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, and Adolis Garcia, and he is now approaching 20 saves. But the big news is the Tigers finally won a game. Before July 20th, the Tigers hadn't won a game since July 8th. And look, despite the 6-game losing streak, despite the 14-15 record since June 14th, the Tigers still became the first MLB team to 60 wins, and they currently have MLB's best record at 60-40, ahead of the Chicago Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers. The American League Central is already in the books. The Tigers have an 11-game lead in the division with 62 games remaining. 6-game losing streaks, those are going to be a part of every team's season. For example, the Los Angeles Dodgers had a 7-game losing streak earlier this month. But this Tigers team is already playing for the postseason because they are all but guaranteed to get in. It can be easy to ride the wave of the regular season, but as long as these guys show up ready to play in October, that's what really matters. Either way, nobody likes to lose, so it's good to see the Tigers get back in the win column, all thanks to Tarik Skubal, Matt Vierling, and Will Vest in Sunday's 2-1 win over the Rangers. Before the Tigers came back from the All-Star break, 6 players participated in the All-Star game at Truist Park in Atlanta. Tarik Skubal, Riley Green, Gleyber Torres, Javier Baez, Zach McKinstry, and Casey Mize. It was a rough showing for the Tigers. Gleyber Torres went 0 for 2 with 1 strikeout. Riley Green went 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. Javier Baez went 0 for 2. Zach McKinstry went 0 for 1. Tarik Skubal gave up 2 runs. Casey Mize gave up 1 run. There wasn't a single positive takeaway from the Tigers in the All-Star game, other than the fact that everyone stayed healthy. But it was good to see that 6 Tigers get honored at the All-Star game. I thought the Hank Aaron tribute was amazing. If you haven't seen it, look it up. I also enjoyed the swing-off instead of extra innings. My only complaint is I want to see more of that, but I'm not sure when that's going to happen next. Like, you look at the last 20 All-Star games, the game has gone beyond the 9th inning just 4 times. So 4 times in the last 20 All-Star games. It's like, when are we going to see this swing off again? Like, we might not see it for another 10 years. Like, that's my only complaint. Otherwise, I loved everything about it. I guess maybe I would have preferred to see Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, and Cal Raleigh, but I understand how it works. The managers had to pick the players before the game in case of a swing off. And those managers did not want to pick players who are already going to be gone. For example, and I know this is a pitcher, but Tarik Skubal, for the last 2 years, he's pitched in the All-Star game, and then he's gone out into the stands and found his family and friends, and he's hung out with them for the rest of the All-Star game. So if Shohei Ohtani or Aaron Judge, if they got a private jet and they left Atlanta in the 6th inning, well, I understand why they wouldn't be in the swing-off because they're not there. But I thought it was still awesome to see Kyle Schwarber, one of the best power hitters in the game. And I hope that entices more of the big-name sluggers to stick around and stay hot just in case there is a swing-off in the future. But I don't think it's coming to MLB games. It was a lot of fun. I want to see it in next year's All-Star game, but again, we need to have a tie after 9 innings for that to happen, and who knows if that's going to happen or when that's going to happen next. Also have an injury update on outfielder Kerry Carpenter, who has been sidelined since late June with a right hamstring strain. He seems likely to be ready for a rehab assignment in the upcoming week, possibly as soon as Tuesday. And then I also want to make sure we're talking about right-hander Troy Melton in AAA Toledo. He has a 2.72 ERA with 9 walks and 56 strikeouts across 36 1/3 innings in 8 games for the Mud Hens. His fastball averages 97 miles an hour and maxes out at 100 miles an hour. And more importantly, it has a 26% whiff rate on that fastball. He also has a cutter and a slider. Both those pitches miss bat, so he's got 3 bat-missing pitches. He needs to be able to get outs against left-handed hitters in the big leagues, which will be his challenge, but He's put himself on the radar for a promotion soon, likely as a starter, but possibly as a reliever. Don't be surprised if we see Troy Melton in the near future. Question one of the big two, what are the three biggest questions for the Tigers coming out of the All-Star break? I wrote a story about this on freep.com, and I want to bring it up here on the podcast as well. My three big questions for the Tigers coming out of the All-Star break. Number one, what is the top priority at the trade deadline? Number two, do the Tigers have enough offense? Number three, can Jack Flaherty dominate again? We'll start with number one. The July 31st trade deadline is just 10 days away, and the Tigers would benefit from these updates. Swing and miss reliever, right-handed hitting third baseman, starting pitcher. Those are the upgrades. Now, the number one priority appears to be the bullpen, and a surplus of top relievers could be available, including Felix Bautista from the Baltimore Orioles, David Bednar from the Pittsburgh Pirates, Ryan Helsley from the St. Louis Cardinals. I think those are the three closers most likely to be traded. I'm not so sure about Emmanuel Clase of the Cleveland Guardians and Johan Duran of the Minnesota Twins getting moved. And at this point, the Boston Red Sox seem all in. They're winning right now. I don't see them trading Aroldis Chapman. But the Tigers need two elite relievers to fix the bullpen problem. Here's why. The Tigers bullpen ranks 30th among the 30 MLB teams with a 22.3% whiff rate, with Will Vest and Tommy Kahnle serving as the high leverage relievers in save situations. Will Vest has a 2.23 ERA with a 28.6% whiff rate, but Tommy Kahnle's been a disappointment. He has a 4.85 ERA and a 22.8% whiff rate. Last year, Tommy Kahnle had a 36% whiff rate. This year, his whiff rate is down to like 23%. And it's not just a 3-game stretch. The whole season, he has struggled to miss bats, and the ball in play is finally catching up to him. So it's no surprise when you got Will Vest and nobody else. The Tigers bullpen ranks 20th in MLB with a 4.08 ERA in 2025 and 26th in MLB with a 4.91 ERA since May 16th, a stretch of 56 games. The solution to this problem? It's Felix Bautista and David Bednar. Both players are under team control beyond the 2025 season. Bautista is a free agent after 2027. Bednar is a free agent after 2026. Bednar has a 2.45 ERA with a 28.9% whiff rate. Bautista has a 35.7% whiff rate. So these guys miss bats. And if you're the Tigers, you really want to win the World Series. You have got to be serious about doing whatever it takes to get not one, but two elite relievers to join Will Vest in high leverage situations. Second question for the Tigers is, do they have enough offense? It looks like yes. When you look at it in the grand scheme of things, the Tigers for the entire season, they rank 6th in MLB with a 741 OPS. And since June 14th, the Tigers have a 14-15 record, but their offense is still top 15 in baseball. So there doesn't appear to be a need on offense. You know, the Tigers like to use their pinch hitters. They like to use Zach McKinstry at third base. And, you know, if they were to go get a third baseman, then that would bump McKinstry to the outfield. And then what do you do with Kerry Carpenter? Like, those are all fair things to question. But at the same time, I think you also have to question how the Tigers got to this point. They evolved from a bottom tier offense in 2024 to a top tier offense in 2025. Yes, because of Gleyber Torres coming in as an elite on base machine. And yes, because Riley Green continues to grow as a budding superstar. But also, the Tigers went from a bottom tier offense to a top tier offense because of the unforeseen success of Javier Baez, Zach McKinstry, Spencer Torkelson. So Tigers need to ask themselves these three questions about the offense. Can Javi Baez maintain his 275 batting average and 750 OPS? Is Zach McKinstry going to keep hitting 280 with an 800 OPS? Will Spencer Torkelson surpass 35 home runs? Like, if there's uncertainty about any of those situations, then the Tigers need to upgrade the offense at the trade deadline, preferably with the power hitter, namely Arizona Diamondbacks third baseman Eugenio Suárez. He's a right-handed hitter. He's a former Tigers player. He's hitting over 250 with 35 home runs, more than 80 RBIs in 98 games this season. He's been on an absolute tear as of late. And this is a guy who I talked to at the All-Star game, and he said that he wants to come back and play for the Tigers. He wants to finish where it started when it comes to his career. The Tigers signed him way back when out of Venezuela. They gave him his MLB debut, and then they traded him in the Alfredo Simon deal. And that was a long time ago, but players remember that. At least Eugenio Suárez remembers that, and he wants to come back to the Tigers, whether that's at the trade deadline right now, or maybe in free agency when the offseason rolls around. But that's a player that would give the Tigers a significant boost on offense, especially if they think that Javi Baez, Zach McKinstry, or Spencer Torkelson will regress to the mean after their red-hot first halves of the season. Then the third thing, Jack Flaherty. Can he dominate again? The Tigers signed right-handed Jack Flaherty to a 2-year, $35 million contract before spring training, with $25 million due in 2025 and $10 million in 2026. After Jack Flaherty made 15 starts in 2025, he triggered an escalator that increased his 2026 salary from $10 million to $20 million, raising the total value of the 2-year deal to $45 million. So Jack Flaherty is now set to collect $20 million in 2026, unless he opts out and returns to free agency. But right now, that doesn't seem like it's going to happen because Jack Flaherty is not pitching like a starter worth $20 million. So he seems likely to stick around in Detroit. And that's a little bit of a problem for the Tigers. Yes, as we look towards the postseason, but also as we look towards 2026 as well, because Jack Flaherty is not the same pitcher in 2025 that he was in 2024, but before the Tigers traded him to the Los Angeles Dodgers. In 2025, Jack Flaherty has a 4.65 ERA with a 9.5% walk rate and a 29.5% strikeout rate in 19 starts. You go back to 2024, before the trade deadline, it was a 2.95 ERA with a 4.6% walk rate and a 32% strikeout rate in 18 starts. So the walks have gone up, the strikeouts have gone down, and it's a 2.95 ERA in 2024 compared to a 4.65 ERA in 2025 for Jack Flaherty. Turnaround for Jack Flaherty would be great. You got 10 weeks remaining in the regular season to do that. It would give the Tigers another frontline starter to pair with Tarik Skubal, Reese Olson, and Casey Mize in the rotation for the postseason, and also in 2026 as well. Like Tarik Skubal right now, it's a 2.19 ERA. Reese Olson, it's a 2.71 ERA. Casey Mize, it's a 3.15 ERA. You imagine if you could add Jack Flaherty, even if it was a 3.5 ERA as opposed to his 4.65 ERA. Like that's a huge boost, and that gives the Tigers just another weapon at the top of their rotation, and that rotation looks a lot deeper going into October. But to get there, Jack Flaherty needs to rediscover the mechanics of his delivery that fueled his previous success. He's been searching for it since spring training, and he still hasn't been able to find it. But if he is able to lock it down, he is able to repeat his delivery, and it's his optimal delivery, the one that's working and allowing him to locate his pitches where he wants, watch out because Jack Flaherty can be really dangerous. All right, question 2, the big 2. Is it time to be concerned about center fielder Parker Meadows? I think it is time to be concerned. It's been more than 100 plate appearances. Parker Meadows missed a lot of time with that right upper arm nerve injury. It happened in late February, and he didn't return to the Tigers until early June. But it's been 33 games, and he's hitting 189 with 2 home runs, 10 walks, and 37 strikeouts. He's really struggling against breaking balls and off-speed pitches. He's swinging and missing more often. He's striking out more often. The walk rate is still at 8%, which is encouraging. That's the same as it was in 2024. But in the past, Parker Meadows, a left-handed hitter, has been the Tigers' leadoff hitter against right-handed pitchers. But these days, he's at the bottom of the lineup against righties. And against left-handed pitchers, Meadows is nowhere to be seen in the starting lineup. He's just not playing anymore against lefties. In the past, Meadows was the 9-hole hitter against lefties. Now he's not even playing, and he's not coming off the bench to pinch hit against righties. He's been struggling. He's been struggling ever since he came back from the injury. So last year, we got to remember what happened. Parker Meadows played 32 games for the Tigers. Then they optioned into AAA Toledo. He spent 2 months there making some swing changes. They were small, subtle tweaks, but they were significant enough that they got him back on track. And when he came back, he hit 299 with an 857 OPS in a 50-game stretch to finish the regular season. And then he had a hit in every postseason game. So maybe Parker Meadows needs another reset just like that to make some type of adjustment. It's just not working for him right now. Priority number 1 for the Tigers with Parker Meadows needs to be getting him back on track. And I'm not so sure if leaving him on the bench is what's going to do. I think he needs to play. I think he needs to get at bats. And I think he needs to tinker with some different adjustments. It's hard to get going when you're not playing. And right now, Parker Meadows just isn't playing because the Tigers are trying to win games. And if Parker Meadows is not helping you win games, then maybe he needs a stint in AAA Toledo. He's been through this before. Parker Meadows, I think, is the X factor for this team when you look at what he gives you defensively, what he does on the bases, and then what he can provide offensively. Like I said, last 50 games last season, it was a 299 batting average with an 857 OPS. This guy is a true difference maker. I said coming into the season that he is like the X factor for this team. because when Parker Meadows is right, it seems like everything is right in the world. And he has not been right as of late. The Tigers have been slumping again. Like I said, it's a losing record since mid-June. Parker Meadows came back in early June. So it's just not going right for him. I think there is a world in which he needs a reset. Maybe the Tigers give it to him. Maybe they don't. Only time will tell. All right, we're going to take a break. But when we come back, we're joined by former MLB general manager, Jim Dukette. Everyone, I'd like to welcome former MLB general manager Jim Dukette, who worked in the front office with the New York Mets and Baltimore Orioles. He currently works as an analyst on MLB Network Radio, and now he joins the Days of Roar podcast to talk about the Tigers as the trade deadline approaches. Jim Dukette, thank you for joining me.
Evan, thanks for having me on. This is a big day. My first appearance on the show. My co-host during the week has been on there more often. So, he's been on before. He gave me the heads up, though. This is going to be a lot of fun, so I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah, you got a few more appearances to go to catch up to Mike Farron, but do appreciate having you on for the first time. So, look, the trade deadline is July 31st. That's 10 days away. As a former general manager, can you explain what it's like for a front office, and specifically for a general manager at the trade deadline this time of year?
Sure. Yeah, this is part of the job that is both hectic, crazy. The adrenaline rush is real, and there's an intense amount of pressure on you as well. And the phone calls, are real because there's a lot riding on this. Like, it's not just your fan base, it's your clubhouse, your players on the roster. If you're in it, they expect you to do stuff, they expect you to add to the team. And so there's that internal pressure there. That if you do make a move or two or three, that can be the impetus to catapult you into the postseason and maybe, beyond, have a deep run in the postseason. So, this is why you are in this position, like to win and to try to, make a difference with your ball club. And so, with Detroit, the way that fan base responds to winning teams, you're seeing it on a daily basis. You saw it in the second half last year, going back to those days when they were, winning and under the Jim Leland years and Dave Dombrowski years. Like, it was incredible being there, doing games for Sirius XM, the pregame shows before the LCS and the World Series appearances. Like, it is, I love that. It's a great baseball town there. So, it's exciting, I think, for the sport to have the Tigers where they are right now.
Another thing as well, how difficult is it to get to the finish line on trades? I think a lot of fans, and maybe even, media personalities like myself, we look back and say, oh, just trade this guy for that guy. But it's not always that easy, right? And for every one trade that gets completed, how many are talked about that don't get done? Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, you can look at it, right now, this year, it's a seller's market right now. There's not a lot of teams that have decided to sell. So, you're in Tigers situation and you're in a finite position of trying to find, guys to upgrade your roster, and you're trying not to give up, talented, as little talent as you can give up. So that's where the negotiation part of it is difficult and fun at the same time. You're competing against a number of different teams for the same guys. And so the price tag keeps going up and up in the seller's market. It's like trying to, buy a car where it's only one or two cars and it's the premium car that you can find and you want it, but so many other people want it in the same breath. That price tag keeps going up and up and up. And there's a price level that you go, well, geez, it's just not worth it. I need to move to the next guy, but there's not a lot of those guys out there. So that's where it really becomes complicated from a front office. Does the team that I'm negotiating with, do they even like the players that I'm offering? Do they like any of our players? You have to kind of sort through those conversations. And, that's the part of it that is the nuance aspect that people don't necessarily realize. You can't just go, well, let's give up this prospect or that prospect. If the other team doesn't like what you're selling them, you got no chance anyway, right? So I think that aspect kind of comes into it as well. I've had plenty of times where I went I just talked about this. David Wright just retired his number. I can't tell you how many with the Mets. And when I was with the Mets, every team wanted him. We weren't going to trade him, but we had like tremendous offers, future Hall of Famers that we could have traded David Wright for. And, those are guys that you're like, well, okay, we'll be better in the short term, but we're obviously not going to be good in long term. And so you have to weigh that as well, in this, which I think a lot of times even players don't completely understand. They're in the now, in that moment where they want to win now. And you have to kind of balance that as general manager, trying to win now, but also maintaining that you're competitive in the future.
We'll get into the Tigers momentarily, but you mentioned seller's market. Now, we still have like 10 days until the trade deadline, and a lot can change. But ultimately, when it really comes down to it, do you think it's going to be a buyer's market or a seller's market? And what exactly does that mean for a contending team like the Tigers?
So I still think it's going to be a seller's market. I just had my radio show where we had 3 general managers that are all in some level of conversation: the Red Sox, the Orioles, and the Diamondbacks. And the Red Sox are clear buyers right now. The Orioles, they're open for business. They're selling, right? And so they're 11 games under 500. The Diamondbacks are right in the middle. He's buying and selling. And so it was a fascinating contrast. All 3 of those guys, because Mike Hazen, who's with the Diamondbacks, said, well, I got to balance both right now. I'm a game under 500. We're playing a lot better lately, but it could go the other way. They're winning 3 in a row. He needs it. He needs bullpen, but he also has potential free agents that everybody's calling him on. And he even said this to me, Evan. He goes, teams that call, they think we're dead in the water. They think we're sellers. He goes, I don't feel it that way. I want to shock the system and take those players off the market and buy. So it's changing daily with 10 days, left, and Arizona could be a huge swing team in terms of if they're not selling, if they're buyers, they're going after some of those other relievers, that I think Detroit's going to be going after and pushing the price tag up. So that part of it, until we get some clarity in that, which we may not till maybe the end of this week, I think there's still going to be some uncertainty in that buyer-seller market.
All right, let's dig into the Tigers. You talk to manager AJ Hinch every week on the Power Rally Show, and you've talked to president of baseball operations Scott Harris and general manager Jeff Greenberg on the front office show. So you have a good feel for what's going on here. What stands out to you the most about the Tigers' continued success as it went from this surprise team in 2024 to now this legit contender in 2025?
What stands out to me the most, Evan, is so what they did last year was a stunner, right? To get in, the percentage chances after the trade deadline, what would they have, like a 1% chance if you go back in time now, almost a year ago, and they got there, right? They had this tremendous run. Then the question was, could they continue it? Could they keep it up, and repeat and build on last year? And they did. And to their credit, I mean, they've been one of the best and had the best record here for a while. Still best record, I think, in the American League. Cubs might, I think, passed them for the overall in major leagues, but still, they're this little losing streak that they've been in, doesn't kind of dull how good that they've been. So, when you look at how young and talented they are, how the pitching has developed into premium pitching, I think they're 6th in starting pitching ERA. I think they're overall 6th in offense. I think I'm more surprised about the offense than I am the pitching. And, I think a lot of that has to do with what Scott, the front office was, with Harris and Greenberg and then obviously with AJ, they work so well in tandem together, putting guys in that, they're getting the most out of like McKinstry and Baez and like these surprise guys, like where did that come from? And they're putting guys in the position to succeed. I think all of those things kind of stand out to me that, the Detroit, I think one of the teams that you go, wow, that has a chance to work for the foreseeable future. You can't really say that a lot about guys when they have young teams like that, but I think with Detroit, you can.
You just mentioned it. The Tigers currently have the best record in the American League, and they're going to win the American League Central, but do you view them as the best team in the American League? Other contenders include, the New York Yankees, the Toronto Blue Jays, the Boston Red Sox, the Houston Astros, Seattle Mariners, Tampa Bay Rays, maybe even the Texas Rangers. Like, where do the Tigers stack up? Because we are already looking to the postseason since the AL Central crown pretty much already belongs to the Tigers, but where are they among all the AL teams?
Yeah, I think you have to look at them, among the best teams in the American League. They've shown that over this period of time. When you get to, this deadline, we're 3.5 months into the season and you've maintained that high level. They are one of the best. I think that, when you get to this point, also you have to kind of look and say, well, who do you believe in? I believe in Detroit. They're a well-rounded and deep roster. And a lot of this is going to depend on, what's done at the deadline. I'm still a little skeptical of Toronto because they haven't had the same type of consistent success like Detroit is. Yankees have gone through a little bit of a tailspin, but I still believe in the Yankees. You have to believe in the Astros, even though they've overcome incredible amounts of injuries. I think the rest of the group, they're trending up, like Boston, Seattle, but they also have areas that concern me, that I think they're trying to address at the deadline. So I think a lot of times we come down to the final 10 days, you go, okay, well, here's where the front offices make their money. They make a deal or two, and that's the impetus to kind of go on a long run in the 2 months and into the postseason. I think that's where the front offices have a huge impact. And I think it's going to, impact the entire race in the American League, what those teams do. And that's why I think with a team like the Tigers, what you need to do to kind of add, but you also have to keep an eye on what those other teams you're going to be seeing in the postseason. What are they doing too? And how do you stack up against those teams?
The trade deadline is July 31st. The Tigers could use a high leverage reliever, or maybe even two, a right-hand hitting third baseman, and a starting pitcher. From my view, getting an elite swing and miss reliever needs to be the number one priority. But then there's also this third baseman in Arizona who could provide a big boost to the offense. Jim Dukette, what do you think the Tigers should do at the trade deadline?
So that's the obvious need, their third base, right-handed power. Like Suárez improves the Tigers so well. Going back to your previous conversation, the problem is Suárez improves like four other teams really well. And so, are you willing to give up your top prospects? What are you willing to give up for a guy like Suárez, who's a rental? I did that back in the past, and it's not fun at the end because you have to give up not that they would do this, but that Max Clark's going to get asked about. That McGonigal's going to get asked about. You're not going to do that in that type of deal, but that's the level of player that you would have to give up for Suárez, at least to get him now. Now, as you get close, and that's even if Arizona is making him available, which, as I just mentioned, they're on the bubble. They may be buying. So I think that I would try to address that first. If it's not him, see if you could get Arenado to waive his no trade. That's going to be difficult also. There's another third baseman, but he's a left-handed hitting third baseman, and Ryan McMahon. You have to see if he's available. So let's just play this out for a sec. Let's say Arizona says, nope, I'm not making him available because we're in it. And Arenado says, nope, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still staying in St. Louis. Do you go down the McMahon route, or do you keep what you've got and go with McKinstry, who plays well at third, and sometimes go Keith at third, and go that route and go get two premium relievers like you suggested, which I think is a really good possibility. Somebody like Iglesias with the Braves, maybe Estevez with Kansas City, or Clase, with Cleveland. It's that level. If they got one or two of those type guys, boy, that would be a huge impact, I think, in the postseason. So, they have a couple different ways that they could go in this if they can't get that third baseman that it looks like they need.
If the Diamondbacks do sell, where does Eugenio Suárez, a former Tiger, by the way, where does he end up at the trade deadline? Because I could see Tigers, Yankees, Cubs, Brewers as potential fits for him. And I'm sure there's more teams as well. But of those four teams, right? Tigers, Yankees, Cubs, Brewers, who is equipped to be the most aggressive to go out and land Eugenio Suárez? Whereas, like you mentioned, it might take a Max Clark to get a deal like that done. It might get to that point, and maybe the Tigers don't want to do that. I guess just of the teams that could be in the mix, where do you see Suárez ending up?
So I think the biggest competition for Suárez, if he is available, would be with the Cubs. They're all in, right? So looking at this, so one of the things that I looked at when I had teams when I was selling, when I was in the front office selling, I went and I looked, okay, who can we kind of take advantage of the extra internal pressure that there is to win? Who's the most desperate? The Cubs are really, because of their front office, he's on the last year of his deal. There is a lot of pressure internally, and they're really good, and they're going to get to the postseason, and I think they're going to win the division. But they also, I think, need to go on a deep run. And so you target, if I'm, looking at let's say any team, if I'm Mike Hazen, who's really smart, by the way, all these teams are smart, I'm going right to the Cubs and go, hey, you have upper level talent, upper level prospects that fit for me. Let's do a deal. And then you're going into Detroit and you're using what you can get from them against them to see if you can take a Clark back or McGonigal back, or, that kind of, and then he's going to Toronto and he's going to the Yankees and he's going to the Mets. Like there's 5 teams that could use Suárez and he would be a difference maker for them all. And that's where I think the problem will come in for Detroit. How desperate are they really? Like we all see it, they need it, but their jobs aren't on the line either, and I think that sometimes plays into the trade deadline.
Yeah, Chicago Cubs president of baseball operations, Jed Hoyer, in the final year of his contract. Kyle Tucker, their superstar, he becomes a free agent for this season. There is no time like now for the Chicago Cubs to win, so that makes perfect sense. Jim, as for a reliever, if the Tigers are looking for an elite closer who can miss bats, who are some of the realistic trade candidates? Like Ryan Helsley from the Cardinals, David Bednar from the Pirates, Aroldis Chapman maybe if the Red Sox fade? Or do you think we could see Emmanuel Clase from the Guardians or Johan Duran from the Twins get moved? I mean, teams are listening on everyone, except I guess the Athletics aren't listening on Mason Miller apparently, but listening on players and actually trading players are 2 very different things. So among the top relievers, who actually gets moved and who fits for the Tigers?
Yeah, that one, is going to be, there's a little bit of guesswork there. You kind of go educated guess, right? So the Cardinals are starting to struggle a little bit here lately. I think if that continues, they're going to move Helsley. He is a top reliever. So I think he gets traded. I think there's been enough smoke around Clase that I think he gets traded, not Cade Smith. There's a ton of interest in Cade Smith too, but he's cheaper and under control for more. I think Clase does get moved. I think Iglesias, who he's had a down year, but he's in Atlanta. I think he gets moved. I don't think Chapman gets moved because I think Boston, they took such criticism when they traded Devers and now they're winning and they had a 10-game win streak prior to losing the last 2, unless they really go backwards and collapse, which is possible. They have a tough schedule coming up, finishing with the Cubs, and then I think they have the Phillies, and then I forget after that. But it's a difficult schedule. So outside of them having a collapse and going the other way, I think they're still buying, and that's what Craig Breslow, who's their chief baseball officer, told me today. So I think those are guys. I'm trying to make sure. Estevez is a guy that I think with Kansas City. I know they just picked up Adam Frazier, but they're trending, they're kind of like up and down, right? So they were trending they won 7 out of 10 going into the deadline, and they lost the last 2 to Marlins. Like they're under 500 at home. There's some things that make you scratch your head, like maybe this isn't their year. So I could see them making Estevez available. So I think those are the top guys that you're going to see moved. I would not be surprised if Kansas City traded a reliever just because of the fact of their inconsistency.
We've already talked about the names Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal, but I want to go back to prospects, right? Like, how do you think Scott Harris should balance win now mode and sustainable success as it pertains to trading prospects? Because the Tigers have 5 top 100 prospects: Kevin McGonigal, Max Clark, Bryce Rayner, Josue Briseño, and Tharon Lorenzo. If you're the Tigers, do you trade one of those guys in pursuit of winning the World Series for the first time since 1984, even if that means your future isn't as strong? Or do you try to protect your future by making those players untouchable?
So the one thing that I would look at, they do have the strength and quality, which not a lot of teams do, right? I would, and I don't know if they will. I think they might, though, take one of those guys. Let's just say it was Lorenzo and or Briseño. Okay, and in terms of their rankings of the pipeline, they're 4th and 5th, but you could, talk to some evaluators who might have them a little higher. But I would try to find the best available controllable piece. It might be controllable starter, might be a controllable reliever that's back end, like a Cade Smith, going back to that, and consider that. The tricky part is you train them within your division too. So a guy like Lorenzo might come back and haunt you for like 6 years. So you don't want that necessarily. So if you could find a controllable, reliever in a different division, that would be preferable. You don't want to be facing, a guy that your homegrown guy, if you can help it. Now, again, the limitations are what we just talked about. It's a seller's market. So if that presents itself and that's the only way you can get Cade Smith as an example, you might have to bite the bullet and do that. But I would, if I'm the Tigers, consider one of those guys. And, obviously you're going to try to get some of the lesser guys of your, and maybe do 2 or 3 pieces and, add on that way. Try to do that first. But in the end, I think for the type of guys that we're talking about, it's going to cost you one of your top 5. And I think, it wouldn't shock me if they moved them. In the end, that's going to be the balance that they have to kind of come up with in that decision.
I want to get back to what the Tigers are doing on the field in 2025. They have 3 AL Comeback Player of the Year candidates: Javier Baez, Spencer Torkelson, and Casey Mize. What do you think about those players and where we stand right now? Do you think any of them could beat out Jacob deGrom to win AL Comeback Player of the Year?
I think all 3 could beat deGrom. I mean, a lot of this too will depend on health. With deGrom, he's had that history of, injury history that, has kind of plagued him. Also, there's always good stories. deGrom is, a guy, obviously he's got multiple Cy Youngs. I feel like the story of Baez is one that you hardly ever see. Like, this is incredible. I'm so happy for him. I'm so happy for the Tigers. That guy was basically, people were calling for his release, right? I mean, and I think you had to, if you're Detroit, consider that. And now this year, he's had an incredible season, made the All-Star team. Like, for me, of all of the, in my eyes, obviously health plays into this. Torkelson has had an incredible year. If I were ranking him, I'd go, Baez is the best story. Torkelson's next. Mize is third, because you expect this out of a number one. If you're Mize, just stay healthy. You kind of expect it out of Tork, but you weren't seeing it. And Baez, people kind of left for the scrap heap. So I think all 3 of them are really, really good stories. deGrom's a great story too, with his, he hadn't pitched in 2 years, but I'm very, very curious to see who ends up winning it at the end of the day. A lot of it may be health, and how they play in the final 2.5 months.
And then we have AJ Hinch. Is this the year he finally wins AL Manager of the Year? It's crazy because he hasn't won it yet. You think that AJ Hinch, with what he did in Houston and even what he did in Detroit last year, maybe would have won at least one of those awards. But do you think he could finally win it this year? And then where does he rank among all MLB managers for you?
I think this is his best year to get it, Evan. I really do. I think, when the voting takes place, a lot of times they'll look at the best teams. They'll go, all right, who's the manager of that team? Okay. Detroit's been so exceptional in the American League all season long, unless they absolutely had a collapse, which I don't expect. I think he's the front runner for manager of the year. Now, listen, I'm biased, and you cover him every day. I have him on my show weekly. Like, this guy is one of the brightest, smartest guys. He's been that way for a long time. And I don't know if anybody gets the most out of their roster, anyone like AJ does. And, I think that to me is like when people didn't think the Astros were going to be good, they were. When they didn't think the Tigers were going to be good, they had become that. And there's a lot goes into it. It's more of an organization award when you give it to the manager, right? You got to give credit to the front office too. But I think AJ has done a tremendous job. So consistent, so smart and bright. He handles his pen well. Like, puts guys in the position to succeed. And you have the kind of career seasons or bounce back seasons. I think all of that kind of plays into the environment that AJ has created there.
All right. Last but not least, I need to ask you about Tarik Skubal, and I have a few questions for you, so bear with me. He's the best pitcher in the world right now, and he becomes a free agent after the 2026 season. The clock is ticking. Does that add any more pressure to the Tigers, and could it impact what they do at this year's trade deadline, knowing that after 2026, Tarik Skubal is going to become a free agent?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating case. Obviously he's not going to be traded. You have to consider that at some point, but we'll get into that in a second. I just think with him, yeah, it does. The timing is now. Like, this window is open for you. And it's not just about Skubal. It's about the roster. Like, you can't give away successful seasons and always look for the ahead for the future. Like, if you're in the mix now, and a lot of teams do this, and I think Detroit's going to do this too. Like, you're trying to win. Like you're going, it's not like maybe an all-in mentality necessarily. You don't have to be, because you remember this, every guy that you acquire, this because you've been covering sport forever. Like, every guy's going to come in. It's going to be a marginal success in terms that you can actually measure the last 2 months. Where they really have their biggest acquisition impact will be in the postseason too, because it's already a good team. So, like, you're looking at this, okay, what do they do in the postseason? There's only a few guys that can really have good, impactful postseasons. I think a reliever and all that Skubal will. The biggest question will be, how far do they go this year? And then what do they do with them next year? With his contract coming up.
Well, that's the big question, right? If the Tigers know that they can't extend him or re-sign him, what should they do with Tarik Skubal? Because again, he becomes a free agent after the 2026 season. So you have him for the rest of 2025, you have him for 2026, and then he's gone. But if you know you can't extend him and you know you can't re-sign him, then what do you do?
So this is a tricky one. So, I think that you might hear his name out there on the trade market this winter. Now, it's not going to come from Detroit's side. It's going to come from other teams interested in acquiring him. We've seen what Corbin Burns got in Milwaukee, who you're talking about, was just coming off a Cy Young award. Milwaukee picked up what they thought was a starter from the Orioles. They picked up a everyday shortstop, third baseman, or Ortiz. So it's DL Hall, Joey Ortiz, and there was a comp round pick. That's what the going rate is if you were going to make a number one starter available. I think Detroit would get more than that. So that's intriguing. But none of those guys have been impact for Milwaukee. Like, as soon as you trade him, you're losing that deal because it's hard to get impact back in return. So I don't think they make him available this winter unless it's just a slam dunk trade. I think they go into the season next year, or even this winter, make a run at trying to sign him long term, see if they can convince him to come in. It's hard to do. He's represented by Scott Boras, right? So, not likely. But I think they go into the season, and then let's see where they are a year from now. If they're back in the mix to win, they won't move them. If they fall out of it, then you'll see them get traded, and then they can always go back and try to re-sign them. That would be my guess if we're looking at a pathway for Skubal.
You mentioned this winter, though. Do you think a Juan Soto type trade could be in store for the Tigers with Tarik Skubal in this upcoming offseason? Remember, the Nationals traded Juan Soto to the Padres, and they got back C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, James Wood, Robert Hassel III, Yarlin Susana, and Luke Voigt. Those are three all-star players: C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, James Wood, Robert Hassel III. He still has a lot of promise in AAA right now. Yarlin Susana is the number 52 prospect in baseball. Could the Tigers get back that type of package? I know Juan Soto's an everyday player, and I know we just got $765 million in the free agent market, but Tarik Skubal could very well be the first $400 million pitcher on the free agent market. So could the Tigers get a Juan Soto-like package, and would that move the needle this offseason? So,
and remember with Soto, I think he had a year and a half or 2.5. I'm trying to remember now of years of control when San Diego traded for all that talent, right? So 2 years. So that plays into that. It's not quite equal.
For sure.
But it would have to be that level of, maybe it's one less impactful guy, which would be an amazing haul for Skubal if they did that. And if I'm the Tigers, you're going to get criticized locally, but you have to look at that and go, wow, that would be organization changing. That would extend the window for your success beyond like that. I feel like they could go on free agent market and get somebody, maybe not quite Skubal, but they could get, and somebody would have to step up internally to replace him in the rotation, which is never easy to do. But, we've seen other teams do that. But I think to really get the Tigers' attention, it would have to be to the level that the Padres did for Soto. And, will teams do that for a pitch? See, the other risk is the pitchers are obviously risky because of injury and all that. So that kind of plays into it as well. If remember Burns, as you know, Burns ended up, after a year, he went on the free agent market, and then he pitched for a month for the Diamondbacks. Now he has Tommy John. So there's a lot of factors with pitchers that you're not getting as much. It's interesting. No one has it, but there's also the risk of injury too. And so it's a fascinating, are you going to go all in? That, it could come back and, backfire on you. So I think it's a tough one. Detroit has to be open-minded to it, but in the end, I don't think that they would get, that level of a take in return. It would be really good, but I don't think it'd be Juan Soto-like.
We'll see what happens to Tarik Skubal in the future. We'll see what happens to the Detroit Tigers at the July 31st trade deadline coming up. All right, Jim, thank you for joining the Days of Roar podcast to discuss the Tigers and share some insight into what it's like as a general manager at the trade deadline. Hopefully we can get you back on the show in the future.
All right. That sounds good, Evan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Everyone, that was Jim Dukette, former MLB general manager and current analyst on MLB Network Radio. We have more to discuss this week, including a full breakdown of the Tigers draft picks on day 2 of the 2025 MLB Draft. But first, let's take a break. Everyone, I'd like to welcome Tyler Jennings, the amateur scouting director for Just Baseball, to the Days of Roar podcast for the second time in as many weeks. We got a lot of positive feedback from listeners about Tyler's breakdown of the Tigers' day 1 picks in the 2025 MLB Draft. So we decided to bring him back to discuss the day 2 picks. Tyler, thank you for coming on the show for a second week in a row.
Yeah, thank you guys for for first off welcoming me back with positivity, and glad to be back to talk some more ball here.
All right, so let's reset. The Tigers selected 21 players in the 2025 MLB Draft. 4 players on day 1. That was Sunday, July 13th, and 17 players on day 2. That was Monday, July 14th. This week, the Tigers signed their top 2 draft picks. Shortstop Jordan Yost, the number 24 overall pick, to an underslot $3.25 million bonus, and catcher Michael Oliveto, the number 34 overall pick, to an underslot $2.45 million bonus. With both those signings, the Tigers saved roughly $850,000 to spread among their other draft picks. Now, we already talked about the day 1 draft picks, including Jordan Yost and Michael Oliveto on last week's podcast episode. But the question for our expert, Tyler Jennings here, can you explain to our listeners how the bonus pool works with overslot and underslot deals, and how saving $850,000 on Yost and Oliveto will maybe help the Tigers sign some of their other guys in this draft class?
Yeah. And with the Tigers, like I remember telling you before, I was kind of thinking Oliveto would be more of like an overslot guy. And here we are. He signs for, I think it was like something a little under like $400K under. And Yost, we all kind of assumed was going to be an underslot. But for that, when you look at the rest of what the Tigers did on day 2, taking River Hamilton, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit, in the 11th round, who I viewed him as like a top 100, top 125 pick. He's a guy with an LSU commitment. So there's obviously going to be a ton of cash to really meet his requirements to get him away from LSU. But the biggest thing really for the Tigers is the fact that when you look at what they do at the end of day 2, around 11 through 20, which is our stereotypical day 3, anything under 150K or at 150K will not count towards the bonus pool. So really you're looking at what you can save in the top 10 rounds to kind of help some of your guys elsewhere. So like anything over 150K on day 3 or 11 through 20 is going to count towards your bonus pool. So if River Hamilton ends up getting closer to $1,850,000, that's going to count towards the bonus pool. So looking at what the Tigers have, they had just shy of $11 million to really work with in this draft class. And that's counting everything from the top 10 rounds and including anything over 150. And they can go 5% over, which kind of puts them, if a 5% overage kind of works out, it goes slightly over $11 million. So maybe like 11.1, I do believe is the correct number on that. So they can do that before they get penalized for spending over the bonus pool amount. But for the Tigers, like we've already seen, like you had mentioned, Yost and Oliveto signing underslot. And I think guys like Caleb Blaze, Ryan Hall, and a few other guys within the early part of day 2, rounds 4 to 10, have signed rat slot or just slightly under. So I'd imagine there's going to be some more savings as signings come out, become more publicly available. Our signing deadline is not until July 28th at 5 p.m. So we still got a little over a week to kind of get everything wrapped up here. So excited to kind of see what the Tigers do here with the rest of the allotted pool they have available.
Okay, so here are the day 2 picks for the Tigers. College left-hander Caleb Blaze in round 4. High school right-hander Ryan Hall in round 5. College lefty Grayson Grinsell in round 6. College righty Kale Wetwiska in round 7, college outfielder Nick Drumsnell in round 8, high school lefty Trevor Heichman in round 9, college catcher Eden Espinal in round 10, high school righty River Hamilton in round 11, college righty Cash Kuiper in round 12, college shortstop Jack Goodman in round 13, college first baseman Bo Anake in round 14, college righty Charlie Christensen in round 15, college righty Joe Ruzicki in round 16, college righty Joey Wimpelberg in round 17, high school lefty Ethan Rogers in round 18, high school shortstop Meridian LaFleur in round 19, and college outfielder Cameron Douglas in round 20. Those are the 17 players selected on day 2 by the Detroit Tigers. Tyler, of that group, when you look at it as a whole, what stands out to you?
What stands out to me is some of the projectable guys that you have later in, round 6 to 10. You look at guys like Ryan Hall, the 5th rounder, for example. He's a guy that was very athletic. He's a quarterback for North Gwinnett High School down in Georgia. So he's a bit more raw in terms of, pitching is still new to him. But beginning of the year, he was touching 95, 96 with a really projectable frame. He's like 6'1", 175. And that was a jump up from last year where during the summer circuit, he was topping at 92, kind of sat around 90. There obviously was more projection going into this year, which is fantastic for him. And I think the biggest win for the Tigers here is, given the mold of clay that you have here, still pretty new to pitching. There's a lot of projection there. The fastball's already gotten to the mid 90s. Can you get him to sit there, as he matures physically? There's a good slider in there. The slider itself is 2-plane breaker, has more sweep than depth, but low 80s, spins the ball very well, has a projectable changeup as well. So it's a pretty good 3-pitch mix to have, for a guy that, again, hasn't really pitched a ton before, last year. I mentioned before, high school quarterback, and that's what a lot of these kids are sometimes. They play 2, maybe 3 sports. Like, for example, Cameron Appenzeller is a 3-sport athlete. He was playing basketball well into the college, or not the college baseball season, but the high school baseball season. So there's a lot of these guys that play multiple sports, and really getting into that kind of profile where he's athletic, you can mold him pretty well. I think that's a pretty good get for the Tigers, and getting him away from a Georgia Tech commitment that reportedly was pretty strong. So he might cost a little bit more than the $430,000 slot bonus that he's assigned in the 5th round. But, looking at what they've done outside of that, Caleb Blaze gets 7 feet of extension from the left side. Grayson Grinsell, he's definitely a performer. Nothing really stands out physically. Like, he's pretty projectable, drop and drive mechanics, but he's also, sits around 88, 89. But so soft tossing lefties, especially if they're projectable enough like Grinsell is, to where scouts just can't really quit that kind of profile. He's a guy that's predominantly fastball changeup, kind of struggles to spin the slider a little bit, but, it's a plus changeup in my opinion, had a 50% whiff rate this year. The fastball has a lot more carry than you expect from a guy that has a bit higher of a release than that he does. Was a bit deceptive as well in terms of, with his drop and drive, you'd expect that kind of arm slot to have an over 6 foot release height. He's under that. I think he's like 5.6 feet off the ground, which is pretty good for somebody like that. So getting 20 inches of vertical carry from that slot is actually pretty darn good. And I feel like he's a guy that can definitely fill out his frame more, probably get more velocity out of it. I'm not thinking it's more of like a Quinn Matthews situation where he just suddenly turns magical out of the blue, but I could see something similar like that for Grinsell, where his stuff kind of upticks a little bit and he has more fuel to spin moving forward, which is, talking to people outside of baseball and coaches and whatnot, they believe that now is a great time for guys to learn how to spin the baseball in development training, because it's just, consider like changing a fastball shape. That's more volatile. It's more dangerous for a guy, because there's so many intricacies that go on there. You can lose command, you can lose shape, but spinning the baseball, learning to spin it better is a lot easier than what it was 10 years ago.
So obviously 2 really good breakdowns, Ryan Hall, Grayson Grinsell. But the big name here on day 2 is River Hamilton, an LSU commit from Sam Barlow High School in Oregon. He ranked as the number 99 prospect in the draft, according to MLB Pipeline. And the Tigers took him with the number 399 overall pick. Who is River Hamilton? What is the upside here? And do you think the Tigers will be able to sign him?
I feel like if you take him in the 11th round, they're more likely than not he's going to sign. In past years, you don't take a guy that high on day 3 if the expectation is that he's going to walk away from significant money. So this is like the pretty obvious, like, he's going to get overslot bonus. I know there's already been a few guys this year that have cracked 1.5 million, like Blaine Bullard from the Blue Jays in particular. So I can see Hamilton getting something like that, to where it lures him away from LSU. And for Hamilton, it's very interesting. Like, he didn't have the greatest summer last year. His spring was kind of weird, but you can kind of see where the traits and projection were with him. For me, I really enjoyed the fastball. And one of my scouting pillars is finding somebody that can really miss bats with the fastball. And that's what Hamilton did. I got up to 94, 95, and you look at the projection, probably throws a lot harder as he physically matures. Hamilton himself, it can get a little bit dicey with command on the fastball, but when it's in the zone, guys really struggle to barrel it up. Has a lot of carry, some tail towards the end of his life. And he's worked on improving the slider. Like, slider spin kind of was interesting last year, where sometimes it looked like a above average pitch, and then sometimes it was just pretty loopy and just inconsistent. But he's also got feel for a good changeup as well. So this is another case where I mentioned with Grinsell, like, learning to spin the baseball is a lot easier nowadays. If Hamilton does get the money to get lured away from LSU, which I think he does, you're looking at a guy that's, again, a good clay model to kind of work with in terms of teaching him how to spin the baseball more consistently. He's already got the fastball value. And again, the projection, that's the biggest thing. This could be a guy that's sitting more closer to 94, 95 in a couple of years' time where, last year was kind of like 91, 93. He would touch a 5 every once in a while. So he's a very interesting arm to kind of dive into. And I really enjoyed the profile. Again, like guys that miss bats with the fastball is one of my big things to look for in scouting. And it was the reason why I was so high on Hamilton coming into the year as well.
2 late round high school draft picks, left-hander Ethan Rogers from Lone Jack High School in Missouri, 18th round, and shortstop Meridian LeFou from Gaston Christian School in North Carolina, 19th round. Ethan Rogers is committed to Wichita State. Meridian LeFou is committed to UCF. Do you think those guys are going to sign with the Tigers? And if they're not, then what's really the point of selecting those high school players so late in the draft?
Yeah, the biggest thing with taking some of these guys later in the draft that, really have college as a primary background is insurance picks. So like say River Hamilton, you don't sign him for whatever reason in the 11th round. Then you can allocate that money that's not used for Hamilton towards Ethan Rogers or LeFou to try and get them to lure away from college. So I feel like, especially Rogers, considering the Wichita State commitment, probably not going to take too much money to draw him away from that one. LeFou is probably a bit more because UCF is admittedly a pretty good development school. We look at Antonio Jimenez, who was a 3rd rounder for the Mets. Didn't get a lot of playing time as a freshman in Miami, goes to UCF and really finds his potential, turns into a near top 100 pick. So that's the main reason why these guys are taken so late. They're like, we'll take you on the whim, see what happens. And if for some odd reason you don't sign somebody higher up, the money then goes towards you. They'll try and lure you away from campus. So that's the main reason why. But Rogers is interesting. He's more of a reliever type for me, but he's been up to 94, I do believe. Pretty hoppy fastball. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of carry to it, got a good breaking ball. He showed up at WWBA Worlds last year, which again, another event that like Michael Oliveto, if he doesn't show up there, probably isn't a 1st round pick like he was. So Rogers is pretty unique. He's pretty projectable, but again, there's some head whack there, some command issues. So whether he goes to campus or not, but time will tell. I think he's the easier one of the 2 to sign. But with LeFou, interesting enough, he reclassed it was either December or January for 2026 to 2025. And that was mainly because his age. He would have been 19 years and 4 months on draft day in 26. So it would have been a big deterrent. A year from now, he would have been a draft eligible sophomore. So he reclassed to where he would have been 18 years and 4 months on draft day to kind of help him out. And he's an interesting profile. He's more of a middle infield guy that has some sneaky pop to him. Some swing and miss. The swing gets a little bit long, but he's still a interesting guy to kind of dive into. He can definitely stick up the middle. I think going to UCF is probably the best bet for him. But again, if money's thrown his way to get him to decommit from that and sign out of the draft, I think that's a big win because LeFou has definitely intrigued a few scouts around the area here in the Carolinas because he is roughly like 2.5, 3 hours away from me. But overall, like those 2 guys, 50-50 on Rogers. I feel like LeFou probably does go to campus. But again, insurance is definitely a big thing with teams in case they don't sign a few guys. But I think that's going to be more of a thing that if River Hamilton doesn't sign, keep an eye on those 2 to kind of be signed out of their commitments and go pro.
Some of the early college selections on day 2. You already talked about Grayson Grinsell, the left-hander from Oregon, whom the Tigers picked in round 6. But what about Caleb Lays, the left-hander from Maine in round 4? What do you have on him?
Caleb Lays, who I mentioned before, 7 feet of extension from the left side is just otherworldly. He's a guy, he didn't pitch in 2024, so he's a senior guy, but I know he got slot value minus the contingency bonus, which is 2,500, doesn't count towards the bonus pool. But again, he's been up to 95, 96. The average extension is like 7.2 feet. And for a guy, he's 6'1", 190. That's really impressive. And the extension has helped that fastball play up from its shape. It's kind of dead zoney. And what I mean by that is the vertical carry and the horizontal run on the pitch are pretty equal. So he averaged like 15 inches of vertical carry, roughly like 13.5 inches of run. But having 7 feet of extension in your back pocket from a lower release slot kind of helps it play up a bit. And he missed bats and wasn't hit very hard. He's got some angle on a low 80 slider, and there's feel for a changeup as well that has good shape, runs off the fastball pretty well. So he's an interesting guy. We talk about Maine not having a ton of draft talent year in and year out. Like the biggest name, obviously, I think people will know would be Jeremy Pena, the Astros shortstop. But Maine has a history of producing some interesting guys, and Lays is just adding to the list of that kind of demographic as well. So he's an interesting guy. I think he can start. We'll see what happens, but it's definitely a unique profile to have from the left side.
Some picks in the middle rounds. High school left-hander Trevor Heichman in round 9 from St. John Bosco High School in California, committed to Memphis. College catcher Eden Espinal in round 10 from UCF. And college right-hander Cash Kuiper in round 12 from Murray State College, which is JUCO. Talk to me about those middle of the draft selections the Tigers took.
Heichman is very interesting. Kind of digging into the profile a little bit earlier today, and it's a guy with pretty good body control for a left-handed guy. He's 6'4", 230, so there's physicality to the profile. And the fastball has a lot more carry than I really expected to when I watched it on film. It gets up to 20, 21 inches of vertical carry. He improved the command this year, which was a big thing because I remember watching an outing where fastball was kind of spray and pray a little bit last year, but he's been up to 95 after sitting 89, 92 last year, working on field to spin, and there's a changeup in there. Getting away from Memphis, probably not going to take too much to do so, in my opinion, but he's a guy that has a pretty long track record of performing in SoCal. I think his only high school loss was against Seth Hernandez this year, which was very interesting. It's either that or he handed him the first loss in Seth Hernandez's career. It's one of the two. Moving past that, Espinal is interesting. I thought he was a second baseman, so it was interesting to see him taken as a catcher, but transferred in from Chipola College, got 1 year in at UCF, and he does not miss the fastball, which is another unique scouting pillar for me where, you see guys with fastballs, you want them to miss barrels in the zone. As a hitter, you want to see them mash fastballs because it's a good foundation for the rest of the puzzle there. He missed fastballs at a 6% rate this year, which really, really impressive for a full year slate of that. And if there's anything to kind of watch, power from the left side is there. It's kind of a slappy swing. He's a switch hitter with more success from the left side. Right-handed swing. He struggles with changeups a little bit, but he's a guy that's going to be hit over power. Probably either going to be catcher or second baseman, one or the two. And then Cash Kuiper has been up to 98 with an interesting profile as well, where pretty easy delivery on film when you watch it. There's not a ton of effort there, but he does have some pretty big fall off to the first base side when he finishes his delivery. But up to 98, pretty good slider as well. Missed bats at a 40% rate this year, and his changeup was pretty good as well. So he's a unique guy. He signed for $150K, so his signing does not count towards the bonus pool whatsoever. But he's a very interesting JUCO guy to kind of watch out for. I know the Oklahoma scout for the Tigers does love going to Murray State quite a bit and selecting these guys. So it's a really unique profile for a JUCO guy to take in the 12th round.
All right, before we let you get out of here, I have a non-player related question for you. It's actually about the draft structure as a whole. You go back to what I think it was 1996 in the New York Yankees. They took the draft to 100 rounds, which was allowed back then. And then you go from 1998 to 2011, the draft is 50 rounds. And then you go from 2012 to 2019, the draft shrunk down to 40 rounds. And then MLB cuts the draft to 20 rounds in 2021. And now you go from 3 days of the draft to now this year for the first time, only 2 days of the draft. You have a day 1 with rounds 1 to 3, and then you have a day 2 with rounds 4 to 20. What do you think about how the draft has changed over the years? And then in particular, what was it like having 2 days as opposed to 3 days here in 2025?
Yeah, it's an interesting structure nowadays, for sure. And I just feel like with the way that they moved it from 3 to 2, I'd imagine there might be more of a cut coming in the future, which is unfortunate, but it feels like it's going to happen at some point, unfortunately. But the biggest thing that really stood out to me this year with it being 2 days instead of 3 was the speed and in my opinion, how quick some of these teams had to work to get deals cut, because, day 2 to day 3, there is definitely you had more time to strategize what you're going to do. So once day 2 ends, for example, Houston Astros taking Ryan Clifford in the 11th and paying him, I believe, the record for a post 10th round signing. you have time to strategize that. This year definitely wasn't the case. And, you know, you get an hour in between. An hour compared to like 15 to 18 hours before is diabolically different. So there's definitely a lot more stress. There's a lot more to kind of like figure out with the new draft strategy that the league's gone with. And I feel like once we kind of start cutting more rounds, say go to 15 or maybe even 10 rounds in the future, I just feel like we're going to be finding ways to cut spending somewhere. So it's scouts that are definitely going to be hampered by that, unfortunately, which sucks because there's a lot of good scouts out there. There really are. And I want to see all these scouts have, you know, futures in the game and everything like that. They do an unsung job essentially in making these development teams work. They make it a fantastic job of trying to get every journey started in baseball. So it's going to suck when that does happen, but I'm hoping that's not the case. We can kind of keep it here. But again, moving from 3 days to 2, it just feels like it might be inevitable at this point. But yeah, it's definitely a lot more fast paced than what it was a few years ago. And considering that we're going to be seeing more bonus pool money next year, I'd imagine it's going to be very interesting to see how strategies change over the next few years. Because this year was very interesting in terms of how like we're moving towards guys signing for less at the top and then getting the more expensive guys later on. So there's probably going to be an increase in that moving forward, which is going to be interesting to watch. But overall, like I do kind of wish we kind of keep this model and put it back to 3 days personally, because I just feel like it's easier on everybody involved, both agents, scouts, players, you name it. So that's where I'm at on that.
All right, Tyler, thank you for coming on the Days of Roar podcast for the second week in a row, this time to break down day 2 of the 2025 MLB Draft. I didn't plan to have you on for back-to-back shows, but the listeners called for it. So keep up the great work and we'll talk more soon.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the listeners for being so positive about that. Thank you, guys.
Everyone, that was Tyler Jennings, amateur scouting director for Just Baseball. All right, it's time to get out of here. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Days of Roar. Please like, rate, share, and subscribe. Drop us a rating and comment what you think about the show. Stick with freep.com/sports for the latest Tigers coverage. I'd like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, sports editor Bill Bradley, and our magical producer, Robin Chan. For the Detroit Free Press, I'm Evan Petzold. We'll catch you next week. Until then, go in peace.